Topping today's news, the government meets leaders of the Haitian community over Shanty town demolitions, more nurses for the healthcare system on the way, and the Bahamas seeking to eventually control its own airspace. I'm Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Members of the government held a private meeting at the National Training Agency Tuesday evening with members of the Haitian Embassy and the Haitian League of Pastors to hear their concerns and to assure them that compassion will be a top priority of the government as the demolition of shanty towns across the country imminent. Our Destiny Johnson has more in this next story.
With the Davis-led administration facing a new legal hurdle regarding the eradication of shanty towns, Prime Minister Philip Davis, Immigration and Labor Minister Keith Bell, Works and Utilities Minister Alfred Sayers, and other government officials held a conclave last evening. A panel discussion with members of the Haitian Embassy and Haitian League of Pastors to hear their concerns regarding the Haitian community. Prime Minister Davis revealing to Love 97 News team that one of the major concerns of the Haitian Embassy and the Haitian League of Pastors is whether the Bahamian government will treat the situation with the passion that it deserves in an attempt to prevent another problem from arising.
The Minister of Immigration, Keith Bethel, thought it fitting to update the Haitian community through their leading pastors about what the government's approach is and their policy is on immigration matters, and to highlight some of the issues that's happening in mainland Haiti and to speak about the challenges that's happening there. So I think it was really an informative session and convocation. The Haitian pastors, as you would have heard, have committed to do their part to assist in dealing with the challenges we're having. They acknowledge it. Most of them all of them are Bahamians, except one or two who are permanent residents of the Bahamas. And they see the Bahamas as their home, and they want to protect the home, just as we who are here, not from Bahamian Haitian descent, to protect our shores, our people, and our livelihoods.
Last night's conclave came on the heels of attorneys for Respect Our Homes Limited and 177 Shantytown residents after losing their bid before the Supreme Court to have the government's Shantytown eradication policy declared unlawful, is taking the matter to the Court of Appeals. These residents are seeking to restrain the government or public utilities from disconnecting any utilities in shantytowns. The group is also challenging the government's decision to issue notices under the Buildings Regulation Act to demolish structures in shanty towns. For his part, Immigration Minister Bell chiming in on what was discussed during the meeting. He says all concerns of the Haitian community of pastors will be taken into account.
We got a number of recommendations, and so we're now going to meet as an immigration department and certainly all of the agencies of government to address those. We have a meeting tomorrow, on Thursday, as a matter of fact.
As for the next steps, Prime Minister Davis says discussions will continue.
We have committed to going into these communities to try to talk with them and let them know that they should try to find alternative housing, and they would hoping to assist in our identification of the residents to sort of disassociate them from those who are Bahamian citizens, those who are undocumented, and those that may be legally documented by their work permits, and to ensure that they all understand that they have to move out.
Last month, Prime Minister Davis put residents living in shantytowns across the Bahamas, whether Bahamian or other nationality, on notice that they will be required to find alternative housing. Just last week, the Shantytown Task Force issued over 200 eviction notices to residents in unregulated communities on Abaco. Minister Bell says he anticipates a meeting on Thursday with the Unregulated Communities Action Task Force to get an update on any movement since those eviction notices were issued. For Jcn News, I'm Destiny Johnson.
Thanks for that report, Destiny. The government standing behind its decision to follow the process as it relates to the granting of citizenship for qualified individuals born in the Bahamas to foreign parents. This on the heels of Chief Justice Ian Winder, who said delaying such approvals is a recipe for social discontent. Minister of Labor and Immigration Keith Bell, responding to that statement, says the process is not to be rushed. The Chief Justice made the statement while delivering the Eugene Depute's Distinguished Lecture on the topic Status, Rights, and Obligations, Legal Issues in Citizenship, Immigration, and Asylum Laws here in the Bahamas. Minister Bell says the Department of Immigration has to carry out due diligence in ensuring the authenticity of documents, as fraud plays a serious factor.
The reality is that the Bahamas is a sovereign state. Everyone has a right to his or her opinion, albeit the Chief Justice. He is the dispenser of justice and the interpreter of our laws. The reality is, though, for our country, where we have a very significant influx of persons into our country, and not just from Haiti, not just from Cuba, not just from Jamaica, but all over the world, persons applying for citizenship or persons who are born in the Bahamas to non-Bahamian parents, we have to ensure that immigration does its due diligence. And in many instances, the delay is not necessarily the fault of immigration alone. We have to ensure that documents which are submitted are authenticated. We have to ensure that we get birth certificates. We know that there is significant fraud. There is persons taking on the identification of other persons. We have had the cases. As a matter of fact, I have 3 cases on my desk right now. And so we have to ensure that we do our due diligence.
Article 7 of the Bahamian Constitution, which speaks to a person born in the Bahamas after July 9, 1973, to whom neither parent is a citizen of the Bahamas, says that person is entitled, upon making application at the age of 18 or within 12 months thereafter, eligible to apply for citizenship of the Bahamas. However, Minister Bell says he does not believe government should have a timeline on when granting citizenship should happen.
When we make a recommendation to go before the cabinet for citizenship, that we are satisfied that we would have exercised we would have turned over every stone to make sure that the person is in fact entitled to that. That will not happen overnight, nor do I encourage that we ought to rush.
News from the health front, more nurses to be added within the public health care system. Revealing this highly anticipated news was Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Michael Dowell, during his remarks at the Public Hospitals Authority Emergency Medical Technicians graduation on Monday. Dr. Dowell believes the implementation of new nurses will fill the gap within the healthcare services. Dr. Dowell telling reporters on the sidelines that implementation of new nurses will also comprise of nurses from outside the country.
As we speak, I had a discussion with the managing director outside, and we are now moving into our second cohort of training, and to announce very shortly our training to bring into the public service and the Ministry of Health 100 trained clinical nurses every year for the next 4 years in order to fill the gaps that are necessary to provide the service that we are happy to provide. Well, first of all, what happened in the previous years, I cannot give you an exact number, but I know with the establishment of the PHA Academy, we made a commitment to the Bahamian people to improve the human resources at the Princess Margaret Hospital, the Rand Memorial Hospital. Coming out of COVID-19, you would realize that we had challenges. Some of our nurses were recruited, and we are recruiting nurses as we speak from other countries. But while that is happening, when we look at the representation of the Pan American Health Organization and the deficiency of healthcare professionals around the world, it is our responsibility at the Ministry of Health and Wellness to begin the necessary training to improve the healthcare workers in our country. This initiative with trained clinical nurses is a very important initiative, and we intend to execute that as soon as possible.
While communicating to members of the House of Assembly that the Bahamas government was successful in its defense against 8 U.S.-based airlines, claiming that the Bahamas overflight fees were unjust, discriminatory, anti-competitive, and unreasonable, Deputy Prime Minister Chester Cooper, who is the minister responsible for aviation, stated that the government remains focused and is taking steps to eventually control our own airspace. Currently, the Bahamas has an agreement with the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, to manage Bahamian airspace above 6,000 feet.
Let me reassure this Honorable House that the government remains committed to achieving a successful and complete resolution of all continuing concerns with the cost-based analysis for overflight fees. We are keen to protect the Bahamas' sovereign right to recover the level of fees necessary to provide air navigational services to our airspace users, which should include building out both the human and infrastructure capital necessary to eventually take control of the management of our airspace.
Although the U.S. Department of Transportation, the DOT, ruled that the Bahamas airspace fee structure is not unjustifiable or unreasonable, the DOT and the 8 U.S.-based airlines plan to continue to pursue their cost-based concerns under the terms established in the U.S.-Bahamas bilateral agreements. Minister Cooper says the government agrees this is the appropriate forum for such discussions and consultations because it is the intention of the government to ensure the Bahamas overflight fee charge scheme is compliant with the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, principles.
We have already received a formal request from the U.S. DOT to commence formal consultations under Article 13 of the U.S.-Bahamas ADA. Our intention is to move quickly to formalize consultations along these diplomatic channels to reach a satisfactory conclusion to these issues at the earliest possible date. In fact, the first meeting is already scheduled to be held mid-April.
The government estimates it will collect $42.9 million over flight fees during the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Since the start of the regime in May of 2021 to November 2022, $49.6 million has been collected, of which $44.6 million represents overflight fees. And finally, in this segment, after being honored and reverenced by family and friends over the last 2 weeks during memorials, newspaper, radio, and TV tributes, the late Bahamian icon, Eldred Ed Bethel, was officially funeralized this morning at Christ Church Cathedral. Arkale Campbell covered the funeral and files this report.
Dignitaries and the public at large had their final opportunity to pay respects to legendary Bahamian broadcaster and diplomat Ed Bethel, who, at the age of 82, passed away in his home earlier this month, with the faces of his beloved wife and dear sister being the last image he'd witnessed after a lifetime's worth of work witnessing the story of this independent nation as he drew his last breath. Now, this morning, those who worked close with him spoke on his legacy, such as his friend and assistant, Alison Northshire, particularly during Mr. Bethel's tenure as a diplomat at the Bahamas High Commission office in London.
H.C. Bethel was a diplomat extraordinaire. Winston Churchill quoted, and I will not say the exact quote that he said, because if you know Winston Churchill, you know it's probably not the appropriate forum to do it. But he referred to a diplomat as someone who would tell you to go to the opposite of heaven, and you would then ask directions. But for H.C. Bethel, he didn't have to say anything. Just his presence in the room told you that he was an exceptional human being. He had impeccable character. He was kind, warm, provided excellent leadership and guidance. He was well loved and respected by all of his colleagues. Everyone was drawn to him and to Don. Diplomats from the African and Caribbean countries would first look in the room before they entered to see if the Bahamas was present, and if they saw H.C. Bethel, they all felt very comfortable.
Some of the top brass at the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas, such as its chairman and general manager, spoke on the stalwart that was Mr. Bethel and what he brought to broadcasting in the Bahamas. While speaking from the perspective of a politician who was covered by the veteran journalists during the prime of both their respective careers, former Prime Minister Perry Christie stressed the important meaning of Ed Bethel's role and his experience and interactions with the late Bethel, followed by the nation's current leader, the Honorable Prime Minister Philip Davis.
At a time when the country was developing an ethos, that characteristic spirit that would cause us as Bahamians to feel Bahamians. We were a colony. He was a broadcaster. He was a voice. And he began the process of doing something that is so vitally necessary in an island nation. Being able to lay the basis of people understanding and feeling that they are a part of nation building, that they are part of this new thing taking place in our country, giving them this wonderful level of excitement and anticipation. And so the obituary describes him as the voice. He was the voice.
To be at the same time both a nation builder and a wonderful human being, to triumph in good fortune and adversity, to be among the best of who we are. Apart from his great strides in public life, I was also happy to know Ed as a friend. And so I was pleased to have that opportunity to visit him a few weeks before he passed. Even though the illness was already taking its toll, he was, with Dawn, still a consummate host, dignified, gracious, thoughtful, forward-looking, and in good humor. We shall miss him. The broadcasting and journalistic fraternity will miss him. The lunch bunch will miss him. Our diplomatic corps will miss him. Our Progressive Party family will miss him. And of course, our nation will miss him.
Described as having contributed to, quote, shaping of the next generation of journalists, Mr. Bethel worked in various media houses and communication companies, including ZNS, the Nassau Guardian, Bahamas Information Services, and most importantly, your very own Jones Communication Network. With Bahamas Ambassador to the United States, Wendell Jones, describing Mr. Bethel as, quote, well-rounded, well-prepared journalist who he owes a great deal of his journalism training to. May he rest in peace.
Thanks for that report, Cale. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.